Olá, caros ouvintes. Este episódio faz parte de uma série de 3 que nós gravamos durante a conferência Esta Igreja está em Obras, organizada pela Rede Reformada, pela Editora Fiel e pela Acts 29. Queremos também fazer um agradecimento especial ao Hugo Moura, que gravou o vídeo e o áudio destes episódios. Francisco Alberto, thank you so much for
Sí.
for being here with us. For those of you, those of us, and for our viewers and listeners that don't know you, who are you, and what do you do?
So my name is Francisco, as my brother said, and I am one of the pastors at Iglesia Bautista Fe, Faith Baptist Church in Sevilla, and I'm also a husband to Rebecca and a father of three kids, Sara, Lucas, and Hugo, and been living in Sevilla, Spain for the last almost 10 years.
Yep. And I'm Alberto, married to Ashley, 4 children, Sergio, Ana Belén, Santi, and Lydia, and I also pastor along with Francisco the same church. Mm-hmm. Yep.
You are brothers, right?
We're brothers, yes.
In faith and
in
blood
flesh.
Brothers,
yes.
Yeah. What is it like to both of you to pastor the same church?
How did that happen?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a long story.
Started with you, so you should probably start the story.
Yeah, it started with me. What's interesting that throughout our lives we've been doing the same thing together.
Yeah, go. You can tell them a little bit about that. It's kind of strange.
Yeah, it's really weird.
We've done many things together.
So yeah, obviously before we were 18 we lived in the same house, but that's normal for everyone to live with their brothers, sisters. But we went to college together. Even though he was a year older, he stayed home first year and went to a community college, and then we went together to Bible college. Then we got married a week apart.
No.
Yes. But the idea, almost twins.
Not to the same woman.
Okay.
But a week apart simply because we thought family from Spain would come to the States to make it easier for them. Yeah. And then
you were living
in the United States at that time. Yeah.
But you are original from Spain?
We're from Madrid. Yeah.
Madrid.
From Madrid. And then a year after I got married, my wife and I came to Granada, spent some time there, helping a new church plant. Then went to Madrid, and I interned for 9 months at the church where we became Christians. And then during that time is when the Lord began directing me towards church planting. I was only 23 years old at the time. And by the time I was 25, God made it very evident that Sevilla was the place where we needed to church plant. We didn't have any family connections. The only thing we have done in Sevilla was the World Expo in 1992. That's the only thing we knew of Sevilla. But we knew that there was a need for gospel-centered church. And so I told my brother that I was going to Sevilla. He said, in the United States, yeah.
Yeah, so we migrated to the States when we were, I was 12 and he was 11. And we have a smaller brother who was 1. So we went through the experience together, going from public school in Spain to the United States to enter my dad was hired as a pastor. So we entered that culture and that space together, went through the culture shock together, went through all of that together, went to college and all that. And when he decided to move to Spain, I stayed with my wife in the United States working while I finished theological studies. And once I finished my theological studies, it was evident God was pulling me to Spain as well, but not really thinking about working as co-pastors. I was just looking for a place to work. I was going to go to Granada and help a relative, and then when that didn't go through, there was no other option in our hearts other than working with them in Sevilla. I didn't have like a huge burden for Sevilla. I didn't have a strong. I just wanted to go somewhere where I could work in a team, and Sevilla was where he was going, so it worked out perfect.
Just just rewinding a little bit, you will talk about that cultural clash when you went to the States. Did you already talk English, or it was like nothing?
Nothing, just basic.
Rolling Stones were still Piedras Volantes?
More or less. Yeah, it was very basic. Very basic.
I still remember my first day of school in America, and I was totally lost. Didn't even know. I did not know what was going on.
You had a Latin community or not? You were in the
we
American...
were. So my dad was essentially planting a church from within an English-speaking congregation, because the English-speaking congregation had a burden to reach the Latino community.
Yeah.
So I think where we felt at home was with the Latino kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
That because the culture was very similar to ours. We spent a lot of time in the streets playing football, and that's how we connected with the Latino community. And so we felt more at home with them than with the Americans.
Okay.
Yeah.
You are the two pastors of the church? There's another? Or
no, we have 3 men in the pastoral pipeline.
Yeah, yeah.
So hopefully, by the grace of God, we'll be more soon.
Okay.
What can you tell us about your church in Sevilla?
What are the challenges?
So our church in Sevilla, it's very diverse, very young. So there's a lot of young families about our age. Because of our background, from the very beginning, very missional, very focused, outward focus. So by the Lord's mercy, we were able to start a church 4 years after planting the first one, and start another church a few years after that. Not that all that was perfect. We made a lot of mistakes, but that did happen by God's grace.
The church that you planted on Sevilla, there wasn't already a church when you went there.
There are churches there, but not
the church where you both.
There was no church. It was a pioneering work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a church plant from zero. The first Sunday, our families and a few odd people. Second service, less people. Third service, less people. You know how that goes. But the Lord, through long-term ministry, just blessed, and we were able to see that. So I think that's something that people know about our church, and that is that we are very serious about multiplication. I don't know what else you'd say.
Yeah, I mean, same thing as gospel-centered churches. There's an emphasis on the proclamation of the gospel. There's an emphasis in making disciples. There's an emphasis in the centrality of Scripture.
Expositional preaching.
Yeah, expositional preaching. The word being central to the service in every aspect, whether it's the singing, the praying, the Scripture reading, and then to us, we make a big emphasis on church being family. So when you become a member of our church, you sign a membership covenant, which is essentially the household of God brought in together. So that's a big deal to us. The family component of our church.
How big it is the community?
So adult membership is 71.
Okay.
As of like 2 Sundays ago, we welcomed 5 new members into the church.
That's good.
And then you add the children, and it's about 115 people total that are part of the. So the adult members and then the children is 115 people.
How many evangelical churches, more or less, are in Sevilla?
So the statistic is 48.
48. Okay.
Evangelical churches, and that's everybody.
Yeah.
When you arrived at Sevilla, it was easy to establish connections with those churches, or do you have any connections with those churches? And I'm thinking how it was for you you came to Sevilla. You were saying that you didn't have any roots there. How did you make it prosper, and who were your main help on all this process?
It was funny because yes, we did establish contact with some of the churches. So our first Sundays there, we would go to different churches. And secondly, the way we connected with people we didn't know, because we didn't know everybody, because we don't know anyone. We were very innovative in that sense. We did a Facebook campaign, and the Facebook campaign was, we're giving a Bible away. And in the process of like 3 months, 80 people in the city asked us to give them a Bible. But the catch was that we had to deliver the Bible. We couldn't just send it to them. We had to go in person.
Yeah.
And that brought some good conversations. We were able to share the gospel with many people, but I don't think any of them actually stuck to the church. And then we also did, every year, we did a basketball tournament to get to know the young people. But again, no one came from that either. But it was just us really trying to connect with the community.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend much of what we did at the beginning. It was two young guys and their spouses just trying to serve Christ somehow.
But it is hard to go to a place that you don't know anyone and start a church there.
Yeah, and so, and also with the churches in the community, we did a terrible job connecting with the churches that were nearest.
Yeah.
Because our mentality was that if they were not just like us, they were against us. So we were very mistaken in that. And now through the years, now we developed beautiful relationships with the churches, even in Sevilla. And we realized that we're not the only healthy church. There are other gospel proclaiming good churches in the city. That's been really good for us to see.
Well, and the interesting thing is that where we're meeting now, as of 2 years ago, is a Free Brethren church that's about 2 blocks from where we initially planted the church. And they're a great older congregation that doesn't have pastoral leadership. And they asked us if we could use their building. And it's a 3-story building in the center of the city. We pay next to nothing.
Yeah.
And we are preaching there once a month in the mornings. But the point being, they were 2 blocks away from where we planted the church. And we were just very, maybe ignorant, or maybe, I don't know what the word would be, in not reaching out to them and just having conversation.
Yeah. How long did it take for you to start to seeing some results? And what did you change? And how long did it take to, okay, now this is starting to flourishing?
I don't know what you think.
A few years, there was, so if you look at our membership right now, very few people remain from the very beginning. And I think that once our culture changed from a culture of programs to a culture of discipleship, then we started to see fruit, because all of a sudden our relationships were deeper around the word, and they yielded, by God's grace, real fruit. So it was probably, I'd say, 3 or 4 years in that we started to see people that actually came, were born again, stayed, and are still with us.
And how do you define that discipleship? So you were doing programming, it wasn't working, and then you start to do discipleship. But how do you do that discipleship with persons that are not coming, or that you are having difficulty to reach?
Yeah, I think it's a culture. How did the Portuguese get their culture? That's a difficult question. It was very organic, very organic. It was something that was progressively happening within us, and slowly infecting the rest. It's hard to really pinpoint and say how it happened, but I think as this happens to all Christians, as you mature in the Lord, as things become more clearly, as convictions are formed, progressively these things, because we're the pastors, eventually it reaches the congregation.
Sorry.
I was going to say one of the ingredients, I think, was what you mentioned at the beginning: family, hospitality. So as we started opening up our homes and having people together around the word to spend time together, that quickly started to change the church. So instead of getting together all these big events for people that weren't really even that interested in the word, shifting that to more of a life on life, day to day, week to week, time together, life on life together around the word, that started to change our church.
And I was thinking, I knew things were clicking. I knew things were becoming convictions, not just of us, but the congregation, when people that were engaged to get married, or people looking for homes to buy, they would tell me or him, we're looking for a house with these characteristics, and we want a big living room, or we want an additional room to be able to be hospitable. And when I would hear that, I was like, okay, this is clicking now.
Yeah, and they were they caught what they saw.
Yeah.
So they saw that in the church. They loved that about the church. And I think of one guy that was agnostic, university professor. He says, what drew me in, what God used to draw me in was the community that I found here, even though I wasn't a Christian yet. I mean, he wasn't a Christian. One of our elders asked him to pray when the service was over. He didn't know he was a Christian. And the guy's, no, I'm not a Christian, I can't pray. But that was one of the elements that the Lord used to draw him in, which was, this is a family. I need to be a part of this.
I think it was you. You were talking about Portuguese and Spanish. We can be near each other and such apart. We are both countries. We are Catholic countries, and probably we have the same problems or approach to evangelization. Our church is trying to, the presbytery is trying to make us more, how do you say, more ready to talk to other people about what we believe. So, in your city, in Sevillia, what are for you what is more difficult to do when you talk with people that don't know God or Christ? Because we are talking to a supposedly Catholic people, but sometimes that's just a thing from the past, from his grandmother or mother, and sometimes we don't know how to approach or how to talk about our faith.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. One, pride. What are people going to think of me?
Yeah.
That's always tough. So when I'm picking up my children from school, and there's hundreds of parents there, the parents from my kids' class know that I'm an evangelical pastor. So far, it hasn't caused rejection; it's caused interest. But it's not interest in the gospel; it's curiosity.
Yeah.
Spanish guy, young, married, for children. That's not a normal Catholic priest.
Evangelical, what is it?
Yeah, and going to school like this, you never see a priest with a Captain America t-shirt. You know, it's curiosity.
Probably a Spider-Man one, but not.
Yeah, but like there's some parents in the school that feel the freedom to talk to me about, hey Alberto, today is Saint Nicholas festivity, and how do you guys, or like my neighbors right now, both of their children just did First Communion, and so my daughter, she likes to bake, and we took advantage of that and made a cake in the shape of a heart that says God is love, and they know that we go to an evangelical church on Sundays, and so to me, I'm not over analytical in the term of like, how do I get the gospel? I'm prayerful, I'm intentional, but I don't try to overanalyze every situation. To me, I did that 6 years ago and got big into apologetics. Yeah. And I read a ton of apologetics books. Yeah. And it made me way too analytical, and I would force conversations in very awkward ways.
We usually think that people are not keen to hear about it, but sometimes when we are engaged in a conversation, we probably people will talk more than we think about it.
Absolutely.
Do you feel that?
Absolutely.
In your context?
I think the problem people have is not interest, because we do live in a very Catholic context where most people I think believe in God. I think they have the same fears we have, which is, what are people going to think? So if I approach Alberto, the evangelical pastor, in the school entrance and ask him about God, what is everybody else going to think? Yeah. So I think it's being prayerful, being intentional about the relationships that we have with people in our context. I think that's the most important thing.
And not being ashamed. We can't be ashamed. I've been able to, I used to teach English, and I would teach English to engineers, aerospace engineers, highly educated Spaniards, successful. They would ask me, and this is maybe the way God has wired me. I told them exactly what I did with no fear, and they were captivated. Hey, can we have a class in English about what you believe? These engineers were asking me, right? So I think a lot of times we have these fears, and those fears keep us from just being natural proclaimers of the gospel. So I think not being ashamed, just being totally frank about what we believe and what we do, I think it's been good.
And you actually, by being over analytical, you actually become awkward in conversation, and you try to squeeze Jesus somewhere, and it just gets awkward. I think when you just be like, having with the guy that cuts my hair, when he asked me what I did, this is 6 years ago now. I told him I pastor an evangelical church here in town, right here, and he was like shocked, but then he was very curious. Whereas if I would have waited and one day sneaked it in there somehow, it would have been really awkward. And ever since then, he keeps asking me about the community. Yeah. Other guys from the church started cutting their hair there, and just prayerful and intentional. I think that's the key.
Let me yesterday one of you were talking and said that presenting the gospel in a profound way, but at the same time keeping it clear and simple. Because we are talking about this, talking about the gospel. How can we do that? You're talking a little bit about that, but how can we be profound?
Because sometimes
at the same time be clear, not entering the apologetics like hardcore and.
I think what I mean by profound is that we have to know really what the gospel is, so that when we talk about the gospel, we are not just repeating information. We're speaking from a theological knowledge, from the heart. And simplicity, I mean that you're able to apply that to the person you're talking to. A lot of times I hear some of our people witness, and it's they're telling them, the audience, what's important to them, the proclaimer. They're not telling the audience what's important and relevant to the audience. So this guy he'll talk the whole time about hell and never bring up maybe the divinity of Christ, his sinless nature, I don't know, something about the gospel. And to this person, hell is fine, but it's not what they're truly that worried about. And I'm thinking, you're not listening to them. You know, they're talking about universalism. Talk about, the exclusivity of Christ. Don't just talk about hell. So that's what I mean, having the knowledge to understand it and proclaim it, and at the same time being able to apply it to the person that's listening.
Yeah, I think one of the most helpful things you can do to be a good evangelist is, one, understand that the gospel is multifaceted. At the center of the gospel is the death and resurrection of Christ. But then you have the incarnation of Christ, you have the ascension of Christ, you have the second coming, you have the entrance of sin, etc. There's so many ways in which we can get to the core, the death and resurrection of Christ. So one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is Spaniards are not talking about hell unless they're using it as a cuss word. Spaniards are talking about nowadays a lot about the importance of creation and how we are, as human beings, destroying this earth, right? And their aspiration is to bring about a restoration of creation. And our gospel speaks about that. Yeah. You cannot restore this world. God will do that. And why is the world being destroyed? Takes you back to creation. Death came into the world through the sin of Adam. That's why the world is being destroyed. And even though we're called to being good stewards of the earth, ultimately Christ is the only one who can restore that. Why can he do that? Because of his death and resurrection. Because he rose again and he's conquered death, he's conquered sin and the devil. At the end of times, he will have them under the dominion, he will crush them, and he will bring about new creation. Now that is something that an ecologist will listen to. And you're keeping the gospel central because it is the death and resurrection of Christ that will do this. And obviously you make it personal. You are also decaying and you cannot stop the decaying of your body. Only Christ can resurrect you through his death and resurrection.
Okay, I think we can
We have a special
finish.
question for you.
Yeah. Before that, let me thank you so much
Yeah.
for your time. It
Yeah,
has been a
no worries.
blessing to hear from yesterday and today that you were talking, and thank you so much for your time. Alberto, I just wanted to finish with an even deeper question. What do you think is worst? Real Madrid losing the Champions League or get on a plane?
Oh, what's worse? Real Madrid losing. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you can go on a plane.
If they told me, get on a plane from here to Australia, or Madrid winning the Champions League, get on a plane.
Okay.
Undoubtedly, it's worth the suffering.
Football, Portuguese and Spanish are obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an idol.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
you.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
Vamos para o céu, vamos ver Jesus. Só vai para o céu quem andar na luz. A luz e a verdade.